Going back to that comment you made, which was very interesting, about being able to act locally but thinking globally, is that right? What
Yes,
you just
think
said?
international, yeah.
So let me now go into a little bit about your background, Peter. You
Yeah.
know, when we were speaking, you'd come out, you'd been educated in Canada, you'd worked, I think, in the financial markets. And can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, yeah, it was one of those things, you know, planned on going to Canada to do my MBA.
Yes.
And 14 years later, I found that I was still there. So,
Wow.
so it was one of those things, you know, I'd gone to do my MBA. And the school where I did my MBA had a program in which, you know, you'd study for 6 months, and for 6 months they'd put you with a company. So I did that for 2 semesters, and the last company I worked for, when I graduated, they called me in to work for them, and they were an investment company called Foyst and Gordon and Payne.
Yes.
They had about 15 billion Canadian dollars assets under management.
Yeah.
So I started off working in the back office,
Yes.
you know, just processing trades and
Yes.
you know, just doing the administrative work. But I always had a passion for research.
Yes.
So I always used to go and bug the portfolio managers and, like, you know, let me in, you know, let me become a research analyst. And they're like, have you ever written a research paper before? And I was like, no, I haven't.
Yes.
So during my own time, with my own initiative, I started writing research papers and taking them to the portfolio manager.
Yes.
And eventually he was confident enough to put me in front of the investment committee, where I, you know, presented my report.
Yes.
And then after that I became a research
So
analyst.
that was the breakthrough moment in your career.
That was my breakthrough moment.
And do
exactly.
you remember what you presented that day?
Yep, it was a Brazilian company called Copel. They were a utility based in one of the states in Brazil.
Yes.
I think it was called
And you were making an investment case.
And I was making an investment case for them, exactly.
And that was the first time you'd sort of got yourself into the front office.
Exactly. That was the first time I sat in front of, you know, the CIO and everybody else presenting my paper. So here was this kid, you know, from back office presenting a paper, but I was well prepared because the portfolio manager prepared me well, because he was like, you know, when you go in there, you need to be sure of everything.
Yes.
Make sure you have all your bases covered, because these guys are going to be tough on you.
Yes.
And they were tough, but I made it through.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's the breakthrough. Then what happens next?
So after that, I worked as a research analyst for about 2 years, and I was doing some portfolio management as well. So the areas I covered was South America, Asia, Northern and Southern Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Asia Pacific region, basically.
Yes.
Mostly looking at utilities, shipping companies, the industrials, and things like that. So after a while I did that, I got headhunted by a mining company.
Yes.
Because the areas I was looking at, or I was responsible in my research analyst roles, were the areas where the majority of the nickel and cobalt deposits are. So that's South America, that's Asia, Indonesia, around that area and everything. So they wanted me to be a corporate development analyst. So what's corporate development analyst is basically in-house M&A.
Yes.
So it was my job, because if you have a mine, you can only mine in an area for, let's say, 30 years.
Yes.
And after 30 years, you need another property to mine on.
Yes.
So it was my job to look for either companies we could buy that had assets, or pieces of land we could buy where there was nickel and cobalt deposits, so that we could prolong our pipeline. So doing that, you know, it was a very interesting job. It took me to Indonesia.
What period was this in? Were the commodity markets on the rise, or?
This is when the commodity markets, so this was 2010. They had just recovered after the 2008 fiasco. Copper was on a tear, and all the other commodities were doing well. You know, oil, that was 100. Now it's at 40, or between 40 and 50. So yeah, it was interesting. So I know it took me to Indonesia.
Fantastic.
You know, I remember at one point I had to, you know, it was a very good experience, basically. So after that, I did. There was an opportunity coming up at the Treasury Department. So the reason I left the M&A role was because in M&A, as I'm sure you know, there's a lot of activity. But there's very few deals that happen. Because you know, you get to a point where you agree on the price or something, but the two principals do not agree, and the deal just dies. This is after you spent, you know, 6 weeks killing yourself over this project, doing the models, doing the due diligence and everything. The principals disagree, that's it. So I found it very frustrating, especially coming from a research role where I do research and then my stocks are added to the portfolio, so I can actually see my hard work working for me, kind of thing. So after that, I got promoted to manage the Treasury Department, which I did for about another 2 years. That was the job I had previously before I came to Kenya.
And then you got headhunted by UAP, or how did you, because transitions back are always very interesting.
No, they're very hard and very interesting. I mean, what happened to me was, it was almost a comedy of errors. So I had been in the Treasury Department for about 2 years, and I'd come home in 2013 in December. And you know, I'd spoken to my dad. My dad was getting older, and you know, traditionally I'm a Kalenjin, so I'm the one who's supposed to come home and take care of my dad. And my dad was hounding me. He's like, "When are you coming back? When you come back, I want to see my grandkids. I want to see, you know, I want you to spend some time in Kenya." And when I flew back to Canada that day, We landed in the middle of an ice storm.
Wow.
So when
in Toronto?
In Toronto, yeah.
Yes.
So when we got to our house, we didn't have any electricity for 3 days.
Wow.
So we had to basically go and live with the in-laws. So you can
Yes.
imagine how much fun that was. So we were the in-laws for a few days or whatever. Went back home. Then in February, there was a week in which it was below -30 for about a week.
Wow.
So that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I was
Yes.
just like, look, I've had it.
Yes.
I can't take this
Yes.
anymore. What am I doing here? I need to go back home.
Yes.
So I started talking to some of my friends here in Kenya who were in the industry, and trying to find out where the jobs were and everything. And one of my friends told me that Dominic Chiari, who's the
Yes.
GMD for UAP,
Yes.
has just started up UAP Investments, and he's looking for somebody to run the business. So my friend called Andrew sent an introductory email to Dominic, and after that I followed up with my email to Dominic saying, hi Dominic, my name is
Yeah.
Peter. I'm looking to come back to Kenya. Here's my qualifications. Here's
Yes.
my CV, which I sent to him. And literally within 20 minutes, I get a phone call, and I'm like, I can see it's 254, so I'm
Yes.
wondering, is this, who's this calling me? And I pick up, and it's like, it's Dominic.
Yes.
So yeah, we
He
had
moved very quickly.
He moved very quickly,
Yes.
yeah, and that's something about Dominic. He's on
Yes.
the ball, and he moves very quickly. So we had a chat for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and he's like, look, this is a very good chat, but
Yeah.
I'd like to take this, make it more official. So I'd
Yes.
like to have an interview with you and the HR,
Yes.
the group HR manager. And so that was probably on a Wednesday. By the Friday, I was having the interview with Dominic, and her name is Winnie Partet.
Yes.
And we had the interview, and it went well. And they were, look, next stage is for you to come down to Kenya and for an interview.
So this is 2014 now.
This is 2014.
Yeah.
This is around, February still.
Mm.
So by March 30th, I was down here. I came for an interview.
Yes.
I expected, to be an interview between me and Dominic.
Yes.
And I walk into the room, and there's like all the board of directors are there, and I'm like,
Wow.
oh wow. So I wasn't really prepared for
They'd
that.
come out in full force.
Yeah, they'd come
Yes.
out. So it was a panel interview,
Yeah.
which was it went well, obviously, because I got the job. But it was but there was it was a very
Yes.
intense interview. I even remember I had to take my jacket off because I was sweating, and I was like, oh my god, this is getting hot. And so we did, that happened. So I called my wife, and I broke the news to her. I was like, look, I think I got the job. No, I got the job. It's
Yes.
time to sell the house, get the kids, and let's move them
That
to.
was probably the smoothest transition back home
Probably,
that I can
yes.
think of.
Yeah,
That anyone
I was very lucky. I have to
Yes.
say, I was very lucky.
timing was good. As
Timing was good. It just worked out that UAP Investments
Yes.
had just started out. My friend knew Dominic, so it was just one of those things
Yeah.
that just came together really well.
At UAP, we enhance lives across Africa to deliver the dreams we all hold so dear. Insurance, investment management, property investment, and financial advisory. UAP, better, simple life.